Incoming transmission.
The Klingonese word of the day is wolf.
These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise.
So, this is a huge victory for the good guys.
Scotty, beam me up.
Resistance is futile.
Live long and prosper.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Greetings and welcome to the Computer Resume podcast, the show covering the entire Star Trek franchise in chronological order for fans new and old. I'm your host, writer-comedian Mr. Todd A. Davis. He is 1/3 of Cinema Shock, and every week he works with the National Wrestling Alliance, the NWA, backstage, interviewing stars, asking questions, and hating time travel. It's Gary Horne. Yay! Gary. Hey, buddy.
Hey, it's so good to be here. I've been on this ship before.
Yeah. How you been, man? It's been it's been a while since you've been on the show. How's life? How are things in the NWA?
Oh, brother, I am keeping it cool like a koozie. I am everything is good. I just assumed you didn't want to be friends anymore. You never call, you never write, you never have me on your show. So I'm happy to be here on this starship.
Listen, I assumed that you were rubbing elbows with Billy Corrigan, Mick Foley, all the ladies of the NWA, all the fellas of the NWA. So it was like,
I'm glad you added fellas in there in case my wife listens. So
let's be honest, your wife, my wife, they are never going to hear this.
That's true.
Unless they're standing at the door.
I'm not rubbing anything involving the ladies of the NWA. That is a lawsuit.
It should be noted, Gary Horne does not make physical contact with any of the stars of the NWA.
Do not touch them.
Do not touch them. That's very true. So maybe since you're involved with that, you can tell me why Crimson won't return my phone calls.
Well, yeah, I don't, I've heard Crimson has a job that gets like real, like almost secret agenty sounding. So it may be that. So yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen him myself in months and months. So I don't know.
Yeah, I've been texting back and forth with him, our mutual friend, Tom Latimer, who I every time I see him online, he seems to be holding a different belt. Is he a belt holder currently?
He is the NWA World Television Champion.
I thought he was the TV champ. Okay, cool. Good for him. Yeah, and just built like a cement truck. The dude is just jacked. He's
if you were playing like a wrestling video game, he would be what your create-a player looks like.
Yeah.
He's just like a comic book artist molded him or something. It is ridiculous. He's so in shape. It's inspiring, and I just want to touch him every time I see him. But like I said, I don't touch.
So. Here we should note again that Gary Horne does not touch the stars of the NWA. but the nicest guy, the absolutely nicest guy. In fact, he's an absolute sweetheart. Yeah. I was talking with him and said, because I threw it out there to him. I was like, hey, if you ever want to come on the show and talk Trek, he's just like, oh, brother, I would absolutely love to, but I'm not a Star Trek fan. I was like, that's okay. If you know anybody, and this, the same spiel I give to everybody. If you know anybody that's a big Star Trek fan, send him my way. And he popped right back of just like, hey, you should talk to Crimson. Like Crimson's a big Star Trek guy. So I was like, okay. So I dropped him a note. I didn't hear from him for a while. And then I saw he posted a picture of his Khan Noonien Singh and Kirk action figures. I was like, oh, okay. So, I commented, it was just kind of like, oh, how do you feel about Montalban versus Cumberbatch? And we got into a big discussion about, Ricardo Montalban versus Benedict Cumberbatch in the role of Khan. So let me ask you, Gary Horne, who is your Khan Noonien Singh, and be prepared to defend yourself.
Well, I mean, it would be Montalban because I can't tell you that I don't think I've actually watched the second Star Trek since the
Really?
theater. I think I
Oh,
saw it a few times
wow.
in theaters and I never watched it again. Not because I hated it like a lot of people act like they do, but I don't know. I just haven't. I get weird about Star Trek when I start watching it again. Like
Mm.
the wife and I started, like, I got her to go through the movies with me, right?
Oh,
So we started
nice.
at one and we watched all of the movies. We got to JJ's and stopped for some reason. We never watched them. And I don't
Hmm.
know why. She loves Chris Pine and the guy who plays Spock. I can't think of his name right now, but
Zachary Quinto.
yeah, Quinto. She loves Quinto. So we just didn't watch them for some reason. And so yeah, I have only seen the Benedict Cumberbatch years ago, however long it's been since that movie came out.
I think what we settled on, the debate between me and Crimson was that Cumberbatch is more intimidating, but Montalban is more iconic. And I don't know if that's an issue of time or just because that film was so highly revered or what, but it's he's got the delivery, leave you buried alive, buried.
Yeah, he goes for it in
Yeah.
Star Trek 2. And so you gotta love that, but in the same way that you love Kirk. So it was like the perfect rivalry, these two guys chewing scenery, and they and I don't know, it's weird because I could see that. I could see Benedict Cumberbatch being like, he's got the size on him that but I mean Montalban was pretty ripped.
Yeah, Montalban was pretty ripped, but like Cumberbatch is like tall. Like
I was gonna say you
he's
could
like he's a big guy. He looks smaller on screen, but like he's a big dude.
no, I'd buy him as like a guy who's like 6'2" or 3 at least, and like Montalban seems like the guy who's ripped, but he's probably like 5'7", and
Yeah.
and I don't
Yeah.
know that for a fact, but I'm just saying. Yeah, you
Yeah.
know who's a big Star Trek fan, and I hesitate to say this because I cannot at all guarantee or promise anything ever.
Of
But
course.
Mr. William Patrick Corgan is a huge Star Trek fan.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Half the time he's walking around backstage at NWA with like a Star Trek hat on. He has like a blue baseball cap with like, it's like the Spock shirt color, the scientist color. It's got the logo, everything. He loves Star Trek.
Are you screwing with me right now?
I'm not, no, I'm really not screwing with you, but that's what I'm saying. I can't promise you, dude. That guy is hard to pin down, but he does like Trek.
Wow. Hell, couldn't hurt to ask. I'll do like I do with everybody else. I'll shoot him a message and see what happens.
Yeah, you'd do better with him. Probably just trying to talk to him about Trek, not trying to pin him down for like a singular episode. I'm sure he doesn't. He's going to be like, I don't have time to watch like one episode and know the context of it. But he would talk it.
Yeah, that's the thing about my show has kind of evolved. I mean, this is episode 110. Yeah, this is episode 110, which is kind of weird to think about. But over 100 episodes, I've kind of evolved to do like we still do like the general format of covering the franchise in chronological order, yada yada yada. But it's kind of evolved to, or we could play a game, or we could do a career retrospective, or we could just geek out in general. It's because I want this to be a safe place for anyone who considers themselves a Trekker to just talk Trek in whatever capacity they feel comfortable with, to the extent that they feel comfortable with. So yeah, I may just shoot him a little note and just say, hey, I don't know. I'll figure something
you're right.
out.
It can't hurt to ask. I've been told that 100 times by 100 different people. If you don't ask, you don't know. And that's the only way you're for sure not going to succeed, is by not asking.
Listen, Billy Corgan will not be the first person to turn me down or give me silence. I've been turned down by a lot of people.
Let me tell you something. Billy Corgan, just the thing with him is and I'm sure this is the same with lots of people who do arena shows around the country and world, is that, I've had some great conversations with Billy Corgan, and then every time I see him, I feel like he doesn't remember who I am.
Yeah.
And I work for him. It's not like a bad way. And that's not me talking trash about Billy Corgan. He's a super good guy. It just he's so busy. Like I'll have a conversation with him one day, and then I have to, if I ask him something about that same conversation the next day, he's like, can you please tell me what we talked about again?
Yeah. I'm sorry, what now? It's Jerry, right? Please tell me he's done that to you at least once.
I think he does know my name finally. But it's
after working for him for how long? He does know my name.
Right.
But it's when he says it, he points at you and kind of cocks his head sideways like, Gary.
Yeah.
Gary. I
know that I know you from somewhere. Do I pay you?
Are you on my payroll? All right. Well, so, getting back into Star Trek here. I know you're a big Star Trek fan. Just, you said just a few minutes ago. So these episodes of Discovery are not new territory for you, but it's probably, when you watch this for the show today, is probably your second viewing. Did you recall watching this before? And did your thoughts, feelings change, or did they resurface? What were your thoughts about this episode, Light and Shadows?
I'm going to be honest here. I don't think I remembered much about the specific episode. I remembered the karate fight in the hallway. Like, I think I remembered that,
That's a good fight.
I remembered like the context we were in, like I remembered the search for Spock, the prequel to the search for Spock, first search for Spock.
Yeah, this is the first search for Spock.
But I don't think I remembered like anything specific about the episode. So it was kind of watching it brand new almost.
Yeah. Because, I watched them as they came out, and then, I watched them going back in preparation for the show, and I feel like I'm picking up more. But you're absolutely right. Like, remembering the details, this might be one of the drawbacks of a serialized sci-fi adventure as opposed to the episodic structure like TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and all that, where because you've got one storyline going throughout, this is kind of, we're in the search for Spock portion of it now, but soon we're going to transition into more of the Red Angel, the Red Angel mystery. And because that is the overarching theme, it's kind of hard to pinpoint a specific episode and the plot contained within. Like, to this point, including this episode, so far in Star Trek Discovery, we've had one bottle episode, just the one. And that was with Harry Mudd jumping back and forth in time and doing the time loop thing, which is a great episode. But, when it's serialized, it's hard to just sit down and watch a singular episode. You kind of have to start at the beginning and work your way through. But, which do you prefer? Being a big Star Trek fan, do you like the episodic? Do you like the serialized? Is it a mix of both?
It's weird. As you were saying that, I was trying to think of how I felt about that, because one thing I would add to what you're saying is, in the world we're in today with as much content as they're in, I remember a point in my life. So I'm sure that I've told this before, but like, I remember watching the original series with my mom, like growing up.
Yeah.
And then there was a station on our satellite in the backwoods of South Georgia, the swamp, that, like, for some reason, the satellite every morning before I went to school was playing an episode of the original series. And I would watch that with her then. So, but, we're old. And back then, there wasn't nearly as much to take your attention. I rewatched the movie. We had the movies on VHS. I watched the movies so many freaking times. I could tell you most details about all those movies, and that's just not how it is anymore. I worry for, like, it's the same with like music, with like when we had to put a CD in instead of Spotify just playing whatever, and there's a million albums coming out every week.
Right.
It's tough. It's tough for people to remember. So on one hand, I can see how it would be troublesome because like people can't just jump in on an episode. It makes it tougher to do that. But also maybe the story as a whole can make it more memorable that people want to come back and watch it as a movie, basically, or something.
Right. I just came back from Trek Fest, and a lot of people are big fans of Picard season 3. I mean, it's a love letter to Trek, but I'm quick to point out that it watches like a 10-hour movie. It truly, especially episode 9 and 10, which they released into theaters, very few theaters around the country. But I kind of wish that they had pushed that a little bit more and got them into a few more theaters, because episode 9 and 10, those last 2 episodes of that season are truly meant to be viewed back to back. Because if you don't, episode 9 ends, and then episode 10 is kind of the aftermath. So as a standalone episode, it's a little disappointing, but it's meant to be coupled with episode 9. I just kind of wish that they had, I shouldn't say that they should have thought it through a little bit more, because Terry Matalas clearly thought a lot of things through, as did Paramount, as did the cast. Like, that was very, very well planned and very well executed. But I kind of wish, for the enjoyment of the fans, that they had said, you know what, let's get it into just a few more theaters. Let's push it just a little bit more. But
it's tough.
Yeah, it's a tough call.
I mean, there's like Strange New Worlds, which I know at least tries to get a few little episodic kind of things in there, and like self-contained stories. Because I think as the Star Trek fan, you probably missed that a little bit. Like, this doesn't need to be like some huge overarching story. I just need to see like them deal with these creatures on a planet, sometimes. But I think for people today, going back to something like the OG series, or God help them, like the Next Generation, which has so many, like that's probably overwhelming to have like this many episodes. That I feel like I can see people younger being like, what is the point? Like, like, where is this going? And
is Data trying to learn?
I don't know what the balance is.
Is Data trying to learn stand-up comedy from Joe Piscopo? Is that this episode? There's a lot of, well, I mean, that's the landscape of television, because back then, 22, 24, 25, 26 episodes a season, streaming services changed all of that. And, I feel like a little bit of that influence also came from overseas, because the wife and I are working our way through Doctor Who again, the new stuff before the 60th anniversary. And 10, 12 episodes a season, and that's it. And we move on. And it's like, man, they kind of had a good thing going there. And I feel like when the streaming services jumped on, it's like, you know what? Especially there in the beginning, where it was kind of like, all right, we're starting this new thing. It's called streaming. So we're going to do our own TV series. We don't have the big budgets like the major networks, but if you guys want to tell a really tight story, 6 to 10, maybe 12 episodes, we can do this. We can make this happen. And I feel like the influence from, some of the cable networks, where they were producing shows like Breaking Bad and The Shield, and stuff like that in that era, which those types of shows, while they are kind of episodic, they are still very serialized. So there's not a lot of fluff going on. Like those are plot heavy episodes through those series. And I feel like they were able to find a nice medium between serialization, British structure, and like the mini series type thing, and we're able to combine it into what we now have. But anyways, I'm digressing a little bit.
Well, no, you're saying all that, and I don't mean to like dive into it, but yeah, it's weird, because I've watched Deep Space Nine through like once, but I think Sisko's amazing. And if you asked me why Sisko's amazing, I could be like, because he is. But I, like, I don't know how many seasons of Deep Space Nine there were, but I know that he made some great calls throughout, and I know it's weird because I know the story of Sisko, like how it kind of goes.
Yeah.
But specific like episodes, like all those in between, I don't know that I remember them all. And I definitely don't remember them all. And so it was his overarching story that mattered the most, I guess. But I think also I care about him because of the little adventures in between too.
When I look at
him.
and looking at I hate to keep referencing it, but like just came back from Trek Fest where I met all kinds of Trekkers, and so many of them are all about a show. But if you really start to talk to them, they're about one singular character, and of course it varies from person to person. But they kind of have this. They have found this ground, this relatability that they really latch onto, and usually some part of it is mirrored in this person's own personality. And I trying to keep myself unbiased, I suppose, in favor of this show. I do still have my favorites from childhood, but moving forward, I'm looking at the merits of every character, and a lot of things are being revealed as I go along. Like looking at Benjamin Sisko, he is continuously fascinating me because he is a blue collar guy who lost his wife trying to raise their son, is put in a position to answer to Jean-Luc Picard, who he feels is directly responsible for the death of his wife. But then he's put in this position with the Bajorans where they see him as this religious figure, as this religious icon. And so I'm starting to formulate I've referred to Sisko as the father in terms of archetypes, quite literally to Jake Sisko, but he is kind of this fatherly religious figure to the Bajorans, although seemingly unwillingly at times. But it's interesting, and I think that's one of the, just because I was raised on Picard, and everything with the Picard series, I feel like I've got a really good idea of who Picard is. And I really loved Voyager, and Voyager is still such a self-contained thing in and of itself. But Benjamin Sisko and Deep Space Nine, I think there's a lot more to that onion that needs to be peeled for myself, to really dive in and really learn more about him. And that's one of the things I'm really excited to get to down the road, obviously, because I've
always been weird about the favorite captain thing. Like, I get it. And if I have to pick, I usually say Kirk, just because Kirk is the one that I bonded with my mom over. I watched so much when I was young.
Of course.
I did see those episodes. I did see those movies over and over again. I love William Shatner and Captain Kirk. Like I just do. But it's always a weird question for me because I'm like, I also really respect Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard. Like I really love him. And at watching Deep Space Nine, I'm like, Benjamin Sisko's great. I did the same thing with Voyager. And, like it was like, they're all good. They're all really solid people. You know what? You don't get to be a starship captain if you're a piece of trash.
That's true. And, even looking back to, as much grief as Enterprise catches, still to this day, even 20 years after the fact, I think there really is some interesting things to be observed and analyzed, even with Captain Archer.
God bless them. They grew on me too. They even over time with their song. It's been a long road.
You singing your parody of Faith of the Heart is one of my, when I go to edit these episodes, it is my favorite part of putting that together. Just like, I get to hear Gary sing. Here it is. But yeah, even looking at Archer, who, they kind of reference him as a cowboy, just kind of running it. It was the Wild West. There was no prime directive. The ship is basically a step up from a submarine. They were able to do things that were in sort of a gray area. And then in the Xindi War, it got even more so, where he was tossing people into airlocks and being like, he'll be good for another 10 seconds. Like, what's happening here? But yeah, and then we get to someone
Star
like
Trek's not unlike the real world, Todd. I mean,
That's
I
true.
will say this, right? It's I don't want to be like this is not a conversation to dive deep into, but we're all standing on the shoulders of giants a little bit. We want to pretend like we're 20 feet tall sometimes, and no, you learn from the generations past, and a lot of those generations sound like the worst people, and I'm sure to. Oh, I'm sorry. I said the F-bomb. I apologize.
It's okay.
I'm sure to Patrick Stewart, or I'm sorry, Jean-Luc Picard, Captain Archer seems like a caveman and ridiculous. But without Captain Archer, there's no Captain Kirk. And I'm sure that Patrick Stewart went through school learning about all the Enterprise captains, including those guys. And, and so it's part of it. It's just, they get better and better because their foundations get stronger and stronger.
Yeah, in looking at those, especially those early captains, and the one that sticks out to me, not only because we're talking about him a little bit today, but also because he has really come into the forefront of most Trekkers' conscious, is Captain Pike, played by Anson Mount, of course, originally played by Jeffrey Hunter. What are your thoughts about Captain Pike, especially coming into Discovery season 2? Now I know we're getting towards the end here, but I haven't had a chance to talk to you since we've been covering season 2. With season 1 of Discovery being so dark, starting with a mutiny and then going to the mirror universe and the Doctor getting his neck broken, like season 1 is dark. But then we get this scene in season 2, episode 1 of Pike's record up on the main view screen. And he says, no, let's take a look. And they go through all of it. And he goes, listen, I know you guys have been through an ordeal. And I feel like he's talking to the audience here. I feel like the folks in the writer's room were like, hey, you know what? Season 1's really dark. We need to kind of shift gears here. And I feel like that speech from Pike to the bridge officers was really meant from the writing room to the audience, where they go, hey, listen, I know you guys have been through an ordeal. Let me assure you, I'm not Lorca. And there was a noticeable tone shift from season 1 to season 2. What do you think of Pike in Discovery and the tonal shift from the seasons?
Pike, I was gonna mention this anyway, and I can't believe I haven't brought him up already, because Pike, Anson Mount, that guy, he could possibly be the coolest. Like you could make an argument for Pike being the coolest. Like he is everything. And you know what is great about him too is like all the crap you could give about Kirk being the way that he is, hot-headed or a ladies' man, like a different kind of masculinity than like a Picard. Although Picard had his too, but there's something about Anson Mount, the way he plays Pike, that like he is cool. He is just direct and just calm, and he's got it together. He is what a starship captain should look like and be, but also not like in the overbearing like way that Kirk could be sometimes. Like he's a very emotional person. He's philosophical thinking. I mean, Kirk could do that too sometimes, but I don't know. There's a vulnerability that Pike has that is really great too. And you especially start seeing it. It's going to happen here and going forward, that, what his future looks like, what he's going to have to deal with. Like there's a guy who's deep. Like that is it's beautiful. Just like open-minded and just, but also very assured, like makes decisions when he needs to make decisions. Like he might be perfect. I don't know.
He strikes me as very much, he's got a little bit of that piratey Kirkness, but also with this, with the very much adherence to the rules and finding that specific wiggle room within, Starfleet regulations when he has to. But the one thing that really sticks out to me, and you and I can both attest to this, having had multiple parties at our respective homes, where do people gather the most at those parties? In the kitchen. Where does Pike like to talk with his senior officers? In his kitchen, while he's making them breakfast burritos and all of this stuff. There's something about the kitchen that is very medicinal, very safe space. Like, how do you feel about this thing about, Kirk was very much in the chair most of the time, more often than not.
Yeah.
Picard was in his ready room or in the conference room, looking out a window, reading a book, looking at his fish, sipping tea. But then we've got Pike here who is, doing eggs, or here's some leftover spaghetti that, you put it back in the pan, crack an egg over it, mix it up, and it's just as good. Or, him connecting with his senior officers that way, like over food, connecting over food. How do you feel about not only Pike doing this, but have you seen this in your own life? Have you, is connecting with someone over drinks, over coffee, over, hey, let's go to lunch, or, hey, we should get the spouses and all go to dinner sometime, or, have you seen this type of thing pop up in your own life, and how do you feel about it?
No, it's so funny you're like talking about it, and this is just as a you're asking about my personal life. So yeah, I would say, like, if I could relate it to an NWA thing, like just being in the back, like I was literally, as you were talking about this, you're really great at describing these things and making me think about them. Like a Billy Corgan would be, I hope he never listens to this, but he would probably take this as a compliment. He's like the Patrick Stewart. Like, I feel like there's this thing that's sort of untouchable about him always. Like, it feels like he's like, oh, he's on another plane of like, he's cool. He'll talk to you. He's like, but there's something else. And he's like looking at the whole huge picture, and he's just trying to dictate things there. And he's passing off things to the people below him to like get things done. And like, he's relying on his crew to make things happen. And anyway, there's a guy who works for the NWA. He is the director of talent relations. He is the vice president, basically. He's Pat Kenny, who's a former professional wrestler. He wrestled under the name Simon Diamond. He was in ECW. He was in like Extreme Wrestling. Like, he's wrestled a lot of the people that names you would know. Like, he's done all that, but he moved on and had kind of gotten out of the business, but then was brought in by Billy he makes relationships with the talent. He kind of helps formulate the contracts. He helps kind of see everything for Billy. He's like the number one, basically, in that relationship. But that same kind of thing, when we would have meetings for the NWA, so weird we're talking about this, he was always cooking something. He was always like in the kitchen, like on Zoom, like carrying his phone around and setting it in front of his stove while he does something. And he's just like telling you what he thinks, or like, well, let me tell you a story about the business. Once I knew this guy that, and he would like tell you some story that would relate to a situation that was happening. And you'd be like, oh yeah, okay, that, I see what you did. Okay, that makes sense. He's really good at that. He also even has the salt and pepper hair thing going on for him that's kind of in the same style. So now I'm seeing him and I'm like, that guy is Captain Pike. That is so weird.
if we don't, around Halloween, man, if we don't see him in a gold jersey, I'm going to be disappointed. This all it comes down to you, Gary. Can you get him to do some Captain Pike cosplay for Halloween?
Yeah, I need to talk to him about that. But like, even in this most recent trip I was at, like at the same time he comes out, and when the other wrestlers are out there, he could sit in the studio or the production area and watch it on a monitor. But he goes out and sits outside and he wants to watch it up close. And so like I've had the opportunity to sit next to him, and he just sits there with his legs crossed and watches it. And he'll lean over and say, you know what they should have done there? They should have done this. Like, this would have worked. This is how you draw the crowd in. Or, or even, like, hey, watch him here. He's going to go around here and he's going to do this thing. and watch how the fans react. I can see it coming. Watch. And then this thing he describes will happen. And it's just like, it's so cool. He like knows all this stuff. But anyway, I could ramble on about him forever. But I totally, as you were talking, I was like, that guy is totally that guy. Because Pike is the guy who he is in this place where he is the captain. Obviously, he deserves to be a captain. You treat him with respect like a captain, but there's something still about him that you can see. He's been in the trenches before too.
Yeah.
He's the kind of guy who will look at a Kirk later and be like, where everybody else might write that guy off, that he would be like, no, just give him a chance here. There's something else, like there's a spark here we could work on, and get to that next level.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, looking at that thing, being able to pick that out of somebody, I feel like is a level of trust. Now, before we get too much further into this, I do kind of want to hit this a little bit. We see Pike, who knows that Burnham has something up her sleeve, but trusts her. I feel like with the wrestling community, whether it's in the ring, whether it's backstage, whether it's in front of a camera on a promo, or even in social media, feel like there's a level of trust, and maybe trust juxtaposed with respect. Like there's that those two things I feel go hand in hand. Can you speak to the level of trust involved in wrestling, especially when we're looking at characters like Captain Pike trusting Burnham to go back to Vulcan and do whatever it is she's going to do? Can you speak about the level of trust
in professional wrestling? If we're going to go really inside baseball, there are the people that wrestle in the ring, the talent, who deserve respect too, and they're the guys that will appreciate a person like Pat, who I talked about, because he's also done it. There is this thing in wrestling that there is this like, do you know what I'm talking about? Have you dealt with what I've dealt with? What I've dealt with? Do you see how this looks for me if I go do this thing? Like, like that sort of thing. Like, they know Pat has. There is a respect and a trust in him to do that. Now, at the same time, there are people. So again, you got the owner of the company, Billy Corgan, sitting up here, and he'll talk to you. It's not that he won't talk to you. He'll try to explain his overall vision for you, but the execution, he relies on these other people to like make it happen. And so even though then Pat, like say there's a night, there's going to be, I don't know, 12, 15 matches in a night or something that are going to happen. Pat can't see all of that. So then the next level down, you have agents, and agents are typically, at least in our field, and I think in a lot of companies, they're also professional wrestlers that have been there and done that. They're wise to the business. They know how it works, because I don't want to spoil anything for everybody, but it's predetermined. So they
hold on. Wait a minute.
So the agents will get there, and Pat has this great job of like, I've been in the production meetings where he makes it very clear to the agents, like, listen, you're here because I want you here, and I trust you to take this to the next level. We're going to give you, this is the way this story goes. We'll let you figure out with the talent how to get there. And so it's like, it's basically like, this person by the end of this match needs to have successfully done this or implied this or done something, like because this is part of a bigger story. So I need you to get them there. How do they get there? You guys work together to figure that out. The agents will usually go to the talent and be like, you've got this guy tonight. You guys are fighting, or you and this girl are going tonight, and this is what's happening. What do you want to do? And then the talent will try to put something together. So they let the NWA maybe even looser than other companies in that aspect. So the talent will try to figure something out. And they'll go to the agent, and the agent says, I like that, but, or, like maybe if you do it this way or tweak this one thing. And so they have to feel like, it's easy to feel like you're on the same level as the talent. But then that's why, like in the production meetings, Pat will be like, you are our voice. They are to respect you as though it's coming from me, as though it's coming from Billy. And so I trust you to not make it dumb and to make it work. And they have to listen to you. If you think something sounds bad, tell them it sounds bad and make them do it. And he's like, and they have to, it's easier in all those aspects, all those levels, if they're these people that have been there before too. And so there is this level of respect that, like, because a wrestler, you know, they want to be tough. They can't win every match.
Right.
They have to not, essentially they're trying to put it in like terms for like a regular show. They're trying not to get killed off here,
Right.
but they're trying to keep their story going too, even if they're not the winner of the next match. And so there's that thought. And so they want to know that somebody is appreciating that fact for them. It's like, okay, this guy's going to beat me. What happens to me? You know, like next, they're like, what is my story? All the wrestlers get to think about their individual stories, and then it, like, you see how it goes up these levels. Anyway, I hope I'm not rambling too much about this.
No, it's, you know, I'm looking back at my example of, you know, of Pike trusting Burnham, but it's so much more complicated than that, because on the other side, you know, let's start at the top, because that's where you started. So let's start at the top. You've got Starfleet up here, and you've also got Section 31. They're both trying to find Spock. So now, you know, with the representatives, you know, you've got Starfleet dictating things to Pike, while you've got Leland and Georgiou dictating things to Tyler. So Tyler is now the representative, you know, there on the ship with Pike, you know, kind of over his shoulder. And Pike has let him know, like, back off. This is my ship.
Right.
But then here at the end, we've got Burnham, who's kind of taking from both sides. Now, the one person who seems to stand out from that is Georgiou, because she's not from this universe. And we are going to get to the recap here in a minute, folks, but I'm having such a good time with this conversation, I'm going to let it go. You know, you've got Georgiou, who has found a place in Section 31, but at the same time, she still holds a level of, I hesitate to call it love, but it's definitely trust and maybe even respect for Burnham. So that's why she'll kind of circumvent all of it to go straight to Burnham. But anyways, you know, there's a lot of things going on between these characters, and there's even storylines that we haven't even touched on yet, but everyone is going through something in trying to accomplish this mission, this first search for Spock.
I think you nailed it. Like, there's this overarching thing happening, but each of these guys, and it's funny, even when you get to Georgiou and Pike, they're both like relaying down to Burnham, we need this to get done. We're trusting you to make sure that happens.
Like Georgiou giving her intel that you know, Section 31 probably has not cleared, but Pike is giving her the leeway to follow up. And that's kind of, you know, you're seeing that trust and respect. But anyways, there's a lot of people working this thing, and we've covered a lot of angles so far. But before we get too much further, let's get to this week's recap. Brought to you in part by our Patreon supporters, Rev J, Jerry Antimano, Cosmic Crit, Kitty B, and David Willett.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Either the well was very deep, or she fell very slowly, or she had plenty of time as she went down to wonder what was going to happen next.
Shuttle 5 approaching the anomaly.
I've lost them. Spock, it's me.
Burnham walks with Pike, reviewing what they knew about Spock's connection to the Red Angel. Not much. With the Federation and Section 31 on the hunt as well, Burnham emphasizes the need to find him first, and asks Pike's permission to return to Vulcan to meet with her foster parents, Sarek and Amanda. Pike grants her leave, Discovery's been ordered by Starfleet to remain on Kaminar to investigate the residual energy left behind by the red burst. On the bridge, Pike and Saru review the readings from the burst in orbit. They're the same as before. Tilly enters, excitably remarking that the readings can't be accurate, showing densities not seen outside of a supernova, which Tilly calls freaking amazing. Pike wonders at the type of tech, to which Tilly replies it might not have been invented yet. Saru launches a probe into the anomaly to determine its origin, but the tachyon levels are disrupting the scanners, so Pike orders Detmer to close in, and for Arium to aid Saru with the analysis. Tyler asks where Burnham is, to which Pike replies she's on personal leave. Tyler feels Pike owes him an explanation. Pike's like,
I'm disinclined to acquiesce to your request.
Alarms begin to sound. Comms and tactical are offline. Owosakun reports the systems seem to be caught in some sort of loop, which becomes certain as the previous exchange between Pike and Tyler repeats. Pike orders full reverse, creating distance between themselves and the now open space-time rift to restore normal functions. Pike instructs Saru to load a probe onto a space bus, which Pike will pilot close enough to launch. As a former test pilot, he knows the space buses better than anyone. In the turbo lift, Tyler tells Pike that he can keep him in the dark about Burnham, but not about the Red Angel. As the official liaison to Section 31, Pike has to deal with him. Pike asks about Valk, to which Tyler asks about knowing the war was over. Pike counters that his problem isn't with Klingons, but about the fact that Valk killed Culber. Tyler replies that he can't get rid of Valk, to which Pike sarcastically replies he knows how that feels.
And on that note, we cue the music.
Burnham lands her shuttle at Sarek's residence and is greeted by Amanda. Sarek sits in meditation nearby, and Amanda says he's been at it for hours. Burnham reminds her that the longer Spock's on the run, the harder it will be for him, a logic Amanda can't refute. Burnham emphasizes her love for her brother and her desire to protect him. Amanda replies that even if she knew, she wouldn't allow her son to be arrested for murders he didn't commit, and flatly replies that she's not seen him. Burnham's not convinced.
Meanwhile,
in orbit over Kaminar, Space Bus 5 leaves Discovery with Pike and Tyler. Saru advises him not to fire the probe into the rift, and Pike acknowledges, his transmission echoing from the temporal distortions. Saru advises him to launch from his current position. Pike hears screaming behind him and witnesses a temporal echo where he shoots Tyler with his phaser. Tyler, who didn't see it, asks if something was wrong. Pike instructs him to launch the probe. As the probe enters the rift, Owosakun warns Pike that a temporal shockwave is headed straight for them. Pike initiates evasive maneuvers, but his transmission becomes choppy, then cuts out. Back on Discovery, the crew can't detect the shuttle on sensors and is getting no reading from its transponder. Detmer warns if they get any closer to the rift, Discovery could be destroyed. Saru informs the crew their mission has changed from one of research to one of rescue.
sucks.
Tilly warns that the radiation from the anomaly will become lethal within 5 hours.
Great.
Saru speculates that time does not move in a linear fashion inside the anomaly, making it impossible to find Pike's shuttle, but also knows that based on the incident with Harry Mudd in Season 1, Episode 7, Stamets is protected from temporal distortions by the tardigrade DNA he introduced into his system.
Meanwhile,
Amanda brings Burnham to a nearby crypt. Inside, bearded, disheveled, and muttering to himself, Burnham finds Spock. Spock then begins reciting the numbers 8, 4, 1, 9, 4, 7. Amanda is adamant that Spock came to her for help, and she would never turn him in. Indeed, under Federation law, she has no obligation to do so, and as the wife of the Vulcan ambassador, she can claim diplomatic immunity to protect him from extradition. Unless the ambassador objects, replies Sarek from behind them.
Meanwhile,
Pike tells Tyler to take the controls while he tries to get a bearing. Assuming Discovery was coming in after them, Pike instructs Tyler to release plasma from the nacelles to let them follow their trail. Back aboard Discovery, Stamets warns that beyond the Rift's event horizon, time would exist all at once, making finding the space bus like catching a grain of sand in a hurricane using a pair of tweezers.
meanwhile,
Sarek confronts Amanda about her decisions. Amanda says she loves Sarek and Spock and reiterates her reading to him when he was a child and suffered Latak Terai. Burnham tells Sarek that Spock's condition is connected to the Red Angel and that she had not told Sarek of this because she wanted to make sure she could find Spock first. Sarek concedes Spock needs help, which is why Burnham must deliver him to Leland. Both Burnham and Amanda object to delivering him to Section 31, but Sarek is convinced the Federation desperately needs the knowledge Spock has, and that outside of them, no one wants to see Spock healed more than Section 31. Sarek's voice quivers when he admits his fear of losing both of his children on the same day.
meanwhile,
As the shuttle circles closer to the aperture, Tyler reports the plasma levels are down to 30% and the shields are down to 23%. He sarcastically remarks that Pike got what he came for, a dangerous mission with high stakes and the added bonus of taking Tyler down. Pike heatedly replies that he's trying to save them and that arguing was not helping, just as something collides with the shuttle. Pike recognizes it as the probe they launched earlier, which has received an upgrade in the form of squid-like metal tentacles that latch on to the shuttle.
meanwhile,
Burnham rendezvous with Leland's ship and brings Spock aboard. Inside the ship's sickbay, Leland assures Burnham that Spock has received a sedative for the procedure he's about to undergo to attempt to repair Spock's neural impulses, and that control would not proceed if there would be any risk. Leland asks if there's anything in his psychological makeup to help them. She remarks that he was brilliant, curious, but when he was a child, he suffered from Latak Terai, which Leland recognizes as being similar to dyslexia, a condition common on Earth, but not on Vulcan. Alone with Spock, Burnham thinks about the numbers he kept repeating. The sequence, she realizes, was backwards.
meanwhile,
Reese detects the deuterium burst from Pike's space bus. Saru orders him to send the positions to Stamets in engineering, who uses them to calculate the shuttle's trajectory, not within 3D space, but through corresponding coordinates in the mycelial network. Tilly wonders if her fourth-dimensional math is wrong, as the burns seem to have taken place in different points in time. 1 week earlier, one the previous day, and one 8 minutes into
The future!
Stamets rushes out of the room, telling Tilly to follow him.
meanwhile,
Tyler's scans show that some of the metals of the modified probe don't match any periodic table, and that atomic decay indicates the probe's core has aged 500 years, which means someone in
The future!
found the probe, modified it, and sent it back.
I guess.
Just then, the tentacles breach the space bus's hull, one of which wraps around Tyler. Recognizing he saw this earlier, Pike tells Tyler to hold still as he blasts off the end of the tentacle, which then rushes forward and impales itself into the space bus's controls, accessing its computer. Before Pike or Tyler can reach the probe, it releases an energy pulse that knocks them prone. Stamets materializes safely aboard the space bus, much to Pike's confusion. He reassures Pike he's from about 10 minutes in
The future!
and would fly them out using the mycelial network.
meanwhile,
Owosakun detects the shuttle exiting the anomaly. Saru orders on screen, seeing the space bus with the attached probe. He orders yellow alert. Ariam reports the probe is searching the computer at an incredibly high speed and that she'll try to lock it out. Pike replies they'll try to do the same. As Stamets tries to fly the space bus closer, power fails, and the shuttle begins to be pulled back into the rift.
disable the cameras for 60 seconds, so listen closely. Your instincts are correct, Michael. That machine is a memory extractor. It will destroy your brother's mind.
Why should I believe you?
Leland is just a puppet following orders. And I didn't think you want your brother's blood on your hands.
So you're telling me this out of the goodness of your heart?
No, the goodness of yours. I know so much more about you than you can imagine. But that's for another time. Right now, you're going to attack me, then rescue Spock, which is good for you. And that will make Leland look bad, which is good for me. 10 seconds, Michael. So, what will you do?
Trying to make it look good?
Not that. Once more. With feeling.
On the shuttle, Saru reports that they are unable to lock on with transporters and will lose them in the rift in 34 seconds. Pike asks Stamets if he can calculate transporter coordinates remotely, to which Stamets replies with a slightly confused, probably. While Tyler continues to bash at the tentacle, Pike initiates the shuttle's self-destruct, while Stamets sends the coordinates to Iwosakun, who beams them out just as the shuttle explodes, taking the probe with it.
Whoa, that was close.
As the space bus explodes, Ariam sees 3 flashing red lights in a sequence, which seem to have an effect on her. Saru asks if Pike, Tyler, and Stamets are aboard. She replies, they are.
Great.
Burnham storms into NCIA 93's sickbay, stuns the doctor with her phaser, returns Spock to consciousness, and escorts him to the shuttle bay. Georgiou fires, harmlessly, into Burnham's shoulder for the sake of the ruse, as she takes Spock aboard her space bus and escapes from the ship.
Whoa, that was close.
Returning to Discovery's bridge, Pike expresses gratitude for the rescue, to which Tilly warns perhaps he shouldn't thank them yet. The shuttle explosion has released a time tsunami from the rift. Once they warp away, Pike and Tyler kiss and make up. Pike then asks Saru about the analysis of what the probe was looking for, to which Saru replied they were still trying to discern that. Pike reasons the modified probe was from
the future!
And so was the Red Angel. When Saru asks if he believed the Red Angel shared the probe's hostility, Pike mentions that Tyler had broached that possibility. In either case, Tyler adds, one thing is certain, they were in a fight for
the future!
On NCIA 93's bridge, Leland confronts Georgiou about letting Burnham escape and asks to know where she's taking Spock. Georgiou replies that he needed her to keep Burnham from finding out the truth, that Leland had been responsible for the death of Burnham's parents. She smugly tells him that he's no longer calling the shots before leaving the bridge.
Meanwhile,
Burnham looks to the computer and instructs it to analyze records based on the number sequence 749148. The computer soon finds a match, a planetary system at coordinates 749 Mark 148, the planet from Star Trek's pilot episode Talos 4.
Ooh, that's interesting.
I hope that I'm not rambling too much, Todd. It's just you I don't know, something about the way you're doing this, the stuff you're talking about, it does, like, every time you're talking, it's like sparking something in my brain. I'm like, wow, this is so weird how much the NWA is like Star Trek now. And it's and I'm like, look, I don't know. It's so weird. Like,
spread the word, brother.
All of a sudden, I'm like just sitting here and I'm like, dang, I never thought of it this way. And you're like explaining something, and I'm like, I've seen that before. And it's anyway.
So here off the bat, now we've already discussed a little bit of what I will refer to as the A plot. Everybody dealing with Burnham trying to find Spock. But I want to take a second and analyze a couple things in the B plot. This is stuff that's happening on Discovery, and it involves the thing that you have voiced time and time again, time travel. So they find this sort of time rift, and Pike and Tyler get into a shuttle to get a probe closer to this time rift so that they can analyze it, so they can try to find out more about the Red Angel. How do you think this time travel issue in the B plot was handled? Did they do a decent job of kind of burying it in technobabble, or is it nails on a chalkboard for you?
It ends up somehow still all being nails on a chalkboard for me, but but I will say this. Out of everything I ever watch, nothing seems to handle time travel better than Star Trek typically does. Because
most of the time, yeah.
They seem to at least understand it's not like, oh, hey, I'll just go back in time and change that. Like I just watched all the Superman movies, and I watched like Lois die in the first one, and Superman flies around the world in reverse and moves time back and saves her. Yeah. And I'm like, that makes no sense.
No, it should, if anything, that should have ripped the planet in half.
Right. Besides the physics of it. And then it's just like, you're still Superman. You flew back in time to save Lois. Now you saved Lois. So Lois never died. So why'd you fly back in time in the first place? Lois never died. And it's like,
there it is.
And now everything blows up and everyone dies. Congratulations, Superman. Instead of, saving who you could, you destroyed the whole universe. But at least with Star Trek, they at least a lot of the times take it to another level where it gets at least on my level of philosophy on it.
Right.
That I'm like, all right, they've thought a little about this, and now it's beyond the amount that I'm gonna think about it. So
right. It helps that they've got someone there on tap who, oh, what'd you do before this? Oh, just I worked in the physics department at NASA. Like, oh, okay, well, good thing you're here. It's right. It's nice to know that those folks at NASA have a decent retirement plan in the writer's room of Star Trek.
Star Trek has a history of like, there's a temporal distortion that substitutes for anything. It doesn't matter anymore. They've at least I think that's been established in like at least its Next Generation.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That's been a thing people say. There's a temporal distortion, and there's a, now I'm a werewolf. I don't know.
Or the other side of
work.
Or the other side of like computer noise. Yes, Georgie, I need you to reverse the polarity. But like a few seconds ago, Georgie was talking to somebody going, they think reversing the polarity fixes everything. So help me. One more person asks me to reverse the polarity, I'm going to lose my, and then that little computer beat goes off and says, aye, sir, right away.
There's literally, I remember a Next Generation episode with like Fraser Crane in it where
yes,
there's a temporal distortion and they end up in like his ship ends up 90 years in the future or something.
Yeah, they do like this. It's a big time loop thing. And I do like that one though. It's so fun. And again, the idea of it all hinging on data and the number 3, spoilers for a television show that's, almost 40 years old.
Well, it's just to say that Discovery is not like, this is canon for Star Trek. This is a thing. This is not something.
Yeah.
I feel like online sometimes I look and there's a lot of hate for Discovery, and I don't get it. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
I don't get it.
There's some crazy stuff, sure, but there's always been crazy stuff in Star Trek. Temporal distortions are not something like Discovery just made up.
Right.
Like Alex Kurtzman didn't just pull that out of his butthole and say like, oh, I'm going to do this. This has been a thing for as long as Star Trek's been around.
Yeah. So it is kind of weird, especially when Stamets appears in the shuttle and he's like, oh yeah, I'm here to rescue you 10 minutes from now. It is a little bit bonkers, but you know what? Like I said, they do a decent job of handling a lot of the technobabble to a degree where it gives it some credibility. Enough that when he does pop in there, you're just like, oh yeah, they figured that out. So yeah, we're good to go.
It's like these people are outside the timeline or something. Yeah. I've said time and time again with like JJ Star Trek that like when they, even that one, they at least like when Spock goes back, it breaks off the timeline. Your regular Star Trek timeline still exists, but now we've started a new one.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. Like this is fine. I don't have to answer any other questions about anything because this is a whole new timeline.
Yep. And it was explained so well. I distinctly remember people being like, really, another alternate universe, another time. I was like, they did a pretty decent job of very concisely and clearly explaining, like, you know, by entering the black hole, you separated yourself from time. You know, whatever could have been is now changed. And yada yada yada. It's like we are in, and Aurora says it, an alternate reality. Precisely. Like, okay, all right, game set. Here we go. You know?
Yeah, I mean that's all you got to do. It makes it tougher when you go back and kill Hitler, and then you're like, Hitler died as a baby. I killed him. Who's Hitler? Why did you kill why did you kill that baby? Like,
you know,
like it messes you up. But if you're on an alternate timeline, that's perfectly fine. I can also accept, like, what this seems to be doing is like they get outside, they're not affected by the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. It's still weird. I could still get hung up a little, but
yeah, and Stamets is immune to time distortions because of the tardigrade DNA. Like, there's that whole element. But yeah, it's, you know, it's funny, you know, talking about going back in time and killing Hitler. Like I mentioned earlier, the wife and I are working our way through Doctor Who again.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you're working on killing Hitler.
That's professional writer, comedian. As a side hustle, I'm also a time mercenary. No, but like, you know, especially in the David Tennant era of Doctor Who, there's a lot of talk about, well, let's go back and kill Hitler, or let's do this, let's do that, and him, or Mount Vesuvius, you know, Pompeii, you know, all of those things. Well, can't you save these people? No, they all died. This is a fixed point in time.
Right.
That the idea of certain things being fixed and other things being fluid, you know, the episode with the weeping angels, like, time travel is wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff. Like, you can
at least respect that part of it. Like, it's weird. We don't get it totally. We do know these fixed points. No matter what we do, this is gonna happen. Like, well,
because if you think about it, if you have the ability to go back and kill all of these horrible people that have existed throughout time as babies, now you've created this legendary monster that for some reason shows up, kills a baby, and disappears. Like, how terrifying is that?
Also, side note, I mean, never mind. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I was going to say, if you're killing Hitler as a baby, is Hitler really, like, you know, he never even became Hitler. Now you just killed a baby also.
Yeah,
like, you
killed a baby.
So it's a whole other weird thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is not the rabbit hole you wanted to go down.
No, because let's say you get caught. You're this time agent going back and killing history's worst people as they, you know, in their infancy. How do you explain that if you get caught? Well, they're going to be terrible in the future. Well, how do you know that? Well, I'm a time traveler. Okay, let's go ahead and burn them at the stake. Like, what? What? Nobody's going to buy that
here. Like, it's weird, man. But I was thinking as you said this, or like Stamets, like he's the real. This episode could almost work decently as a standalone if I feel like people would be thrown off by some of the subplot. Like, they go a little too much into the subplot that like the Stamets thing that just randomly would appear as like a what's the words? Do ex machina, you know, like that he could just you're immune, you could just appear. I mean, they've established this, but you need the context of the rest of the show to know all of that, you know.
Right. You know, I feel like, you know, again, we even get this weird time thing of like, they send the probe out, the probe comes back, and it is radically different. Like, it's kind of this squid thing now that is attacking the shuttle, and it's just kind of, it was gone for a few minutes. No, it was gone for like 500 years. Like, well, who sent it back? We don't know. So let's jump back into the A plot. for a second, because I want to discuss a little bit more another level of trust, and talking about this thing of trust. We see Burnham show back up on Vulcan to her adopted parents, Amanda and Sarek. And, we just briefly talked about killing babies. There's this one element of them trusting this one child to a point. And then there's this element of betrayal of trust between the mother and father in order to protect the other child, Spock. Looking at this and, having parents yourself, was there ever well, mom said I could do this thing if it's okay with you, or dad said I could do this if it, did you ever play your parents off of each other to try to get your own way with this sort of thing?
I feel like that's like a rite of passage. Like, I feel like you at some point, like
that is a God-given right of every child to play their parents against each other.
If it's not working this route, you try the other route. And then it's definitely. I mean, I think I've 100%. And my parents divorced fairly early on in my childhood, and it was like a whole thing for me. But then, my dad would want to do these certain things, and then my mom wouldn't want to let me do these certain things, or vice versa. And so, yeah, you get to have a little fun with that. I don't think I was having fun. I think I was miserable at the time, but I look back on it now and I'm like, this is okay. But this one's tough too, because like I had a hard time not just looking at Sarek as a butthead in some of this, because he seems, and mostly because even if you think he has, and I think as the story plays, you'll come to respect him more. He seems real easy to give up Spock to Section 31. It's just like, there's nothing on Vulcan. We'll give it to these guys. And it's like, wow, really? Sarek? It's like you're just like trusting this other thing.
Yeah, what I thought was very interesting was the relationship that Burnham has with Amanda, because Amanda was not, I mean, she quite literally says it in the episode, and I'll paraphrase here, but like she wasn't allowed to love Spock the way a human mother would. So when when Burnham came into their lives, she was able to give all of that love and affection to Burnham. Now, when Spock is in need, now she's sort of taking that trust and sort of, bending that relationship to fit her needs. And even in betraying Sarek, she led Sarek to believe that Spock was somewhere else, but it was all to fit her means of protecting her son for the first time. So, but at the end of the day, at the end of this scene, we get Sarek, pleading to Burnham, saying, look, I can't lose both kids. Whatever happens, I can't lose both of you. Please don't make me lose both of you. So, and again, Amanda doing what she feels is right. Sarek trying to figure out and do the right thing as well. But with the lack of communication, look, we're both married men. I think you would probably agree, most relationships, communication, it is the key to a solid relationship.
I've never had a fight with my wife over anything.
Okay, so now we're going to shift to a new segment of relationship advice with Gary. Please enlighten us.
No, I think you were on the right track. Communication is key, and we'll all fall short. I don't know if we'll fall as short as Sarek and Amanda, but we'll fall short.
Yeah.
This is a weird situation they found themselves in. Also, I think, did she want to be found? I feel like there was a lot of buildup to the search for Spock, and then it was just kind of like, oh, he's right here. He was here the whole time. He was
like one
basement.
of those sliding closet doors. It's just kind of like, here he is.
He's over there.
He's in there. He's in the back.
Forgot. I just remembered where I put my keys.
Oh. Yeah, it does seem like he's hanging out in the back bedroom. It's a little weird, and at the same time, like I'm fascinated by the dynamics of these characters in this very deep relationship. Spock being the product, being a child of two worlds, and Burnham being adopted into this family creates another specific dynamic, let alone all of the cultural things involved in trying to raise two very different children. It's weird. And any other thoughts about this level of trust and betrayal? Like, have you, without giving away the farm, maybe this is not the best question as we're, talking about a lot of NWA stuff, but have you ever seen where like someone had a chance to do something great and they just fell short and they felt like they betrayed everybody? I'll put myself out there. Like when I went to work in law enforcement, after I, worked a couple years at our local county jail, I was able to get a job going to the city police, and I was super excited about it. When I was a little kid and they asked, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" I knew, I kind of knew, okay, Batman, that's out. I'm not going to, yeah, that's not on the job listing. But I thought like the closest thing was being a police officer. And so I got to that point where, hey, they swore me in. I went to the academy and got on the job and the whole thing. And it very quickly was revealed that this job was not what I had thought it was. And things, it was a lot of my misconceptions about what was required of me to effectively do that job. And I know that I had called in a couple favors to get that job. It's no secret there, you need somebody to take your resume to somebody else and say, it's this person. And that's across the board. That, that's not exclusive to law enforcement. No. But I had called in a few favors, and when the situation was kind of crumbling around me, one of the things I felt was this big level of shame and regret that I had let all these people down, there was a level of, I've betrayed their trust and I fell short. And that was really, really hard for me to accept, deal with, and move on from. And there's times where I still, it still rears its ugly head, as it were, and I think about it, but then I'm reminded of all the stuff I'm doing now. And, it's a chapter in my past that I feel like I've learned a lot from and have grown from it. Is there anything that you can relate to in terms of, that level of trust? Burnham got clearance from Pike to go back and do this thing. Pike is trusting her. Georgiou trusts Burnham to take the information and do what she needs to do with it. Tyler, to a degree, within his duties as a Section 31 officer, knows, believes, and trusts in Burnham as well. Have you ever seen this where like trust has been, there's been disappointment because of trust and it was broken? Or, if there's something from your life that you can relate to, great. If there's something, on the professional level, does any of this speak to any of your experience?
The first thing that comes, listen, if we're talking about me, I've failed so many times. So I have a steady failure. And, but like you said, you think about what you're doing now and you're like, wow, hell, none of this would have happened if I didn't get there. Like if this other thing hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here. So you always have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I'll say, I do remember, since all I'm doing today is relating to wrestling, I do remember a recent example of, this is probably, I would say we're at like 7 or 8 months now, so I'm holding them to this. But there was a time when I won't name names so that I don't like out anybody here, but there was a time where we had a new champion, and the champion's job was to go out there, and they needed him to, like, he had just gotten the title at the pay-per-view, so he needed to go out the next night on the show we were doing in front of the crowd, and he was gonna set up an angle where somebody was gonna come challenge him, basically. And it would be like a good, like, oh, you're the champion now, and he'd get to beat somebody else, basically, to like, this is why I'm the champion. I'm this badass guy. Well, the guy they picked was a younger guy on the roster. And they were like, listen, the champ's going to go out here and he's going to just address the crowd. And can we get you? This is a good opportunity for you. Can you go out there and talk some crap to the champ so that he's like, if you don't like what I'm doing, let's fight about it. And then you guys will have a match and it'll go great. And like, you know, you're going to lose, but this is a good opportunity for you to step up into a role that's going to be on screen and like you be
moving the plot forward. You get opportunities. This is our person who's doing this thing. Yeah. The pieces come together.
And so I watched this guy get addressed by Pat Kenny, who I mentioned earlier, to like, this is what I want to see from you. You need to just go out there, hit these points. Okay. But otherwise deal with your agent. And so then he deals with the agent, and then the agent's like, okay, so I think you should say it this way. Like, let's work on this. Then we'll get to, then you're going to do this thing and he's going to do this thing, blah, blah, blah. So they work it all out and everybody, are you sure you got it? You sure you got it? Yes. Yes. Oh no, I'm ready. I want this opportunity. I am ready. And the guy goes out there and proceeds to like accidentally say the champ's name wrong, references the wrong belt. It's like, and this is in front of a live crowd.
Yep.
And so everything else goes appropriately, but by the time they get to the back and the champ, I only saw all this because we had been talking. He's like, we're going to do an interview later. I got this one thing at the start of the night, and then the rest of my days off. Like, you know, like this is all I'm doing.
Yeah.
But everybody gets to the back and they're like, what was that? Like, what did you just say? Like, who, none of what we just discussed did you just do? And this guy, this younger guy was just like, oh, did I do that? I don't know. He didn't even realize what he'd done. And
no.
But so anyway, because it's in front of a live crowd, they needed this for TV. Like they needed this for, you know, like we got to do something so the champ appears on television. Also, we're recording this for TV, and you've just screwed this up. And we can't just go do it again because you just had a live crowd out there watching it. And now we're going to just redo it and expect them to just react the same way as they just did. And oh, I just decided to do this again. So anyway, basically they ended up, everything had to be moved to the end of the night. And so it was like the show's over, the crowd leaves. We're like, we got to play this angle out to record it in front of no crowd. Like this is just, so then it becomes like the champ is just doing something about like donating to food banks for some like commercial he wants to shoot. And the guy comes out and they try again. And it works out. I mean, it happens and all that. But I remember sitting in the production area with Billy and him just being like facepalm, you know, like, oh my God, what is this guy doing?
Oh no.
What is happening here? He swore to me he had this. And I'm not sure it's the most amazing example, but I remember him being like, people being like, are you done with this guy? And he's like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not done with this guy, but it'll be a year and a half before he gets a mic in his hand again.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's going to just take what I feed him for a while.
Yeah. Cause I mean, there's only the spin machine only gets you so far. There's only so many ways you can spin that type of thing of like it makes me think of, I remember Chris Jericho and his first interaction with Santino Marella, and him getting, the way they played it was Chris Jericho's like, you know, because Chris Jericho's Chris Jericho. He's been around for a long time, and Santino was fairly new at the time. And they were playing off of, Chris Jericho kept saying his name wrong, and they had this back and forth. And I was just like, oh, you only get away with that once a blue moon, man. And maybe not even then, So, and again, I think because Santino is so immersed in that character, being that character, and Chris with his background in, broadcasting, journalism, and working in the wrestling industry for as long as he has in so many different aspects as he has, you got two professionals who are just, they're working the crowd. It looks like they're working each other. They're working the crowd. But yeah, it's, you get somebody out there who's still wet behind the ears, as it were, and just pumped up and excited, and they go out and just everything that's in their head is gone. I've blanked at shows, at, professional comedy gigs, where I've had to take a step back and be like, I forgot my next bit. So what do you guys want to do? You try to play it off and hopefully you get back on track. But yeah, once you're in it and people are looking at you and the microphone's in your hand, like, do something.
It's a whole other world, man. It's like once you're in front of people, it really is. And so like to Star Trek, like, in the show wise, story wise, you're talking about life or death situations. So
right.
You got to think that it's even a bigger deal to put your trust in somebody to manage a situation, to handle it, And so I think also it would be good for people to remember that it's easy for you to trust Burnham because you're like, oh, main character energy. This is that person.
Of course.
But Pike doesn't know that.
Yeah. Pike doesn't know that she's the main character of a TV show.
Right. So you got to think Pike's a dude who's been doing this for a long, long time at this point. And he's like, why do I trust this hothead? He's got to come to a certain point that he's like, okay, I can trust you to get this done, And it's interesting.
Going back to into wrestling a little bit, and I will tie this to Star Trek, but at one point before the proverbial poop hits the fan, we've got this moment where Pike and Tyler are sitting in the shuttle flying the thing, and Pike is not happy with Tyler, and Tyler's just kind of trying to hang on and do what he's got to. He's trying to do his job too. But there's that level of trust again, and they end up having to force through it and work through it. I remember an episode of Glow, which you've seen Glow, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of love Glow. It was a wonderful show. It broke my heart when it ended the way it did. But anyways, there's an episode in there where Debbie is still trying to learn the ropes, quite literally, and actually goes to a match and meets with the face backstage, who explains how it all works, and working with the heel. He's like, oh yeah, we're not friends. He's got a job to do, I've got a job to do, we know our roles, we do our jobs. It seems like this art, and it is an art, wrestling, is so dependent on the character interactions. You talk about different programs, legendary programs of Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair, and even stuff more recent of I was super into the Edge and John Cena, back and forth, that whole thing. There's tons of them. There's tons of them throughout history. But, have you seen where there's this great chemistry on screen, and then the cameras stop and it's just kind of like, all right, good to see you, take care, bye. Have you seen?
I mean, I could think of one right off the bat that comes to my brain is and I have seen it in our locker room too, that there are people that are not best friends that are going out there, they're just like, I'm just doing my job.
Right. And I'm not asking for names, I'm just, I don't want to break kayfabe,
but since this was a very public situation, at the birth of the real online, the internet wrestling community, the IWC, when this all happened. But you might even remember some of this, but Matt Hardy was dating Lita, and they were a well-known couple They were two wrestlers, and Matt Hardy and his brother Jeff were the Hardy Boys. They had Lita. They were Team Extreme. Matt and Lita were a couple, and this was a well-known fact in and outside of the ring. They were a couple, and then Matt had gotten injured. He was gone for a while. Somewhere during the time, Lita and this other wrestler named Edge became a thing, and it was a secret, quote-unquote, thing. And somehow, I don't remember all the specific details, but Matt basically found this and aired that grievance online. And so this was like I feel like this was one of the first big ones, like open online, was that, this happened. And Matt called her out on it, that she had cheated with Edge. And there was that whole thing, and there was this big blow up, and people hated Matt and people hated Lita. I think at the time, because we had not even evolved it to a certain point, that like a lot of it went into like shaming Lita, and anyway, somewhere along the way, then there was like issues, and they fired Matt for a minute, and the fan demand was like, this is injustice, and like they would chant Matt Hardy's name anytime Edge or Lita were in the ring, and like they would it happened every time, and to the point where the company WWE hired Matt back, and then all anybody wanted to see was Matt and Edge. And it was like those two guys, like eventually there was a match, Edge was in it, and Matt Hardy busts in the ring and starts beating the hell out of Edge, and then it leads up to a match at a pay-per-view. They're gonna fight and all that stuff. It's a work, that's what we call it. Like it's a work. Like they knew going into this. I don't think they were best friends anymore.
Doesn't seem like it, no.
But they were professional. They were like, this is what's best for business. This is getting us both paid. We're getting on the pay-per-view. We have the hottest thing going in wrestling right now. Is us two beating the crap out of each other. And but I guarantee you they didn't leave the ring and were like, oh, great, brother, I love you so much. This was the best day of my life. No, those two guys were not. I don't think they were probably ever best friends again. They were not cool with each other again, but they were also at the same time professional about, when you go out there, we have a job to do and we're going to do it.
Yeah. No, that's a good example. Yeah. Do you have any more thoughts about this episode before we move on into the stats?
I would give a props to Ethan Peck, who I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time he actually is Spock on screen. And, those are big shoes to step into, and that's good. I was skeptical also, but good job.
Yeah, he did a great job. This, I'm kind of skipping down into this, but yeah, for folks who are keeping track, this is Ethan Peck's first filmed appearance as Spock. Now, he previously did voiceover for Brother, which was season 2, episode 1, and New Eden, which was season 2, episode 2, while his first appearance in the chronology was actually Short Trek's Q&A. And that was a really fun episode where he gets stuck in a turbo lift with number 1, and they have a back and forth.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So, like we said, we've talked about a lot of people going through a lot of stuff in this episode. But as we do every week, lovingly, we always ask the question, who do we blame? This story was written by Ted Sullivan and Vaughn Wilmot. Now, Wilmot's last work was season 2, episode 2, New Eden. He worked on the teleplay with Sean Cochran, and we discussed that episode with Ian Ramsey, aka Star Wrecked, on episode 103. You're a big music guy, Gary. Is Star Wrecked on your radar at all? Have you seen any of his stuff on YouTube?
I don't think so. No.
The way I've been describing him to people, and Ian hasn't told me not to do this, so I'm going to keep doing it. He is the Weird Al of the Star Trek universe. Like he is cranking out those. Take a pop song and Star Trekify it, and that's what you get from Ian Ramsey.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, he is Star Wrecked on YouTube, so check that out. And then Ted Sullivan His last work was the first episode of this season, season 2, episode 1, Brother. That was written by him along with Berg and Harberts. We discussed that episode with Star Trek superfan Kevin Hebenstreit back on episode 102. He also, Ted Sullivan also penned the teleplay for this episode. And this was directed by Marta Cunningham, who graduated from Georgetown University. Her first credit was one episode of the short-lived Running the Halls in 1993. She followed that up with Tyson, a TV movie in 1995, in the role of Lisa. And she starred in that alongside Star Trek alum Paul Winfield as the infamous fight promoter Don King. And Marta worked steadily through the late 90s and into the early 2000s. And then there's a 10-year gap in her resume. But in 2004, Marta married actor James Frain, aka Sarek, from Star Trek Discovery, and they eventually had 2 children. And in 2013 would see Marta's directorial debut that she also produced, Valentine Road, and this true crime documentary of the murder of 8th grader Lawrence King by his classmate Brandon McInerney went on to win awards at film festivals in Miami, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Atlanta, the UK, Tel Aviv, and Madrid. So yeah, she got some heavy traction with that one. But this opened the door for her to continue directing TV, including episodes of Pretty Little Liars, Transparent, Room 104, How to Get Away with Murder, and You. But this is her only work in the franchise so far. After this, Marta helmed episodes of Fear the Walking Dead and Dear White People before writing and directing an episode of both Cinema Toast and Modern Love. And recently, she's directed 6 episodes of Chivalry. So, yeah, that's her work. In terms of guest stars, it's a bunch of familiar faces, but I'll give you all the rundown. Returning, we've got Shazad Latif as Tyler, Anson Mount as Pike, Michelle Yeoh as Georgiou, James Frain as Sarek, Mia Kirshner as Amanda. Of course, we mentioned Ethan Peck as Spock, and we've got Alan Van Sprang as Leland. And one other note here before we move on. So Burnham mentions that Spock's shuttle disappeared in the Mutara sector. The sector's Mutara Nebula is where Spock dies 28 years after the events of this episode in Wrath of Khan. So that's kind of how it all connects there.
Oh, interesting. I would say also, Pike, there's the real lead into there's the mention of Talos 4 in this. So we're going to get into that. I think it's going to go into it in the next episode, probably. That seems to be where they're headed. But Talos 4, for if you're fans of the original series, that's going to be Pike's going to vacation there, according to the original series. So.
Yeah, I've already started putting my notes together for that episode. And, we actually covered the pilot episode, The Cage, a while back with comic book writer and illustrator Brian Denham from Antarctic Press. And The Cage is so much fun to watch. And to be honest, I kind of want to go back and watch The Cage juxtaposed with the next episode, If Memory Serves. That's the title, If Memory Serves. So I kind of want to watch those back to back, because I've already seen in the notes where they make a couple of interesting comparisons, and there's a couple of callbacks directly to that episode, The Cage. So it's that one's going to be fun. So make sure you're here for that. So Gary, let me ask you the question that we ask everybody each time we look at one of these episodes. Is this essential viewing? If somebody is sitting down and working their way through the Star Trek franchise for the first time and they come to this episode, is this one they can skip, or is this a must-see episode?
Given the fact this is the first real appearance, like series wise of Spock, I'd have to say it's essential. This is Spock intertwining officially, it feels like, with the Red Angel story. And so, especially if you're watching Discovery and trying to get through it, this feels like a key point in the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Besides the fact that we're kind of in this, this search for Spock and this mystery with the Red Angel, for lifelong fans, of the franchise, for first-time fans of the franchise, the character of Spock is one that is woven throughout, throughout the entire franchise. A lot of people like to point at the captains, but at the end of the day, Sarek was in Enterprise. So if you're following like the Spock family tree, like you kind of get some of it throughout the entire franchise. And this, with the first on-screen, with this being the first filmed appearance of Ethan Peck as Spock, this is pretty pivotal. All the rest of the plot and narrative aside, if you're a fan, this is definitely a must-see episode. Well, Gary, thank you so much for joining me today, carving out the time. I know you're super busy. Do you have any parting thoughts before we go? Thoughts on the episode, the franchise, the comparison of the franchise to the NWA? Any parting thoughts before we wrap it up?
I hope that someday the National Wrestling Alliance is as successful as Star Trek. No, this is great. I'm glad to be here. I'm happy to come back anytime. I'm glad we worked it out so that I could be here. And I love Discovery. And I think if you're for some reason watching this and you're like just going along with Todd's episodes here, Discovery is well worth it. It's only gonna get more bat bleep crazy at the end of this season. And so it's a lot of fun, and it's worth sticking around for. And I love the host you've become, Todd. This has been great. This has been a blast.
Thanks so much, buddy. Well, folks, I can't just have one of my co-hosts from Cinema Shock and not have the other. Next week, we will be joined by film historian, food and beverage connoisseur, and self-therapizing Lego builder Justin Bishop to discuss Discovery Season 2, Episode 8, If Memory Serves, which is available exclusively on Paramount Plus. Gary, where can people find the things that you are working on and support what you've got going on?
I thought of Justin, by the way, when I was watching this, because I think he's been waiting. I think he even texted us one time in the group chat about, like, is something going to ever happen with this Commander Arium? And something seems to be happening with Arium at this point.
Yeah.
Like, he loved the look of her. So
he's in for a surprise.
Yeah, so I think you get the hint of that here. So anyway, I am at TIPW Show on all the social medias. That's my wrestling podcast. This is Pro Wrestling on YouTube at This is Pro Wrestling. You can follow the National Wrestling Alliance, which I hope you'll all support, at NWA everywhere, even youtube.com/@NWA. All the shows that I've been talking about, all the wrestling and all the regular serial things that are happening with the NWA are there on YouTube for you to watch for free. It's easy to dive into. And if you need help on essential viewing there, I'm more than happy to assist you. I am at This is Gary Horne on everything.
And I am at Mr. Todd A. Davis on all of the socials. From all of us at the Computer Resume podcast, thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you in 10 Forward.
Us on Patreon and like, rate, review, and share on all your favorite platforms. Feel free to send us your subspace transmissions to computerresumepodcast@gmail.com or at Computer Resume on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The Computer Resume podcast was created and produced by Mr. Todd A. Davis. Our logo was designed by Will Martin and Justin Bishop. The opening theme was produced by Justin Bishop, and our outro music was provided with permission by DroneNode. Additional music was provided by Mr. Todd A. Davis and Gary Horne, and the voice of Computer Resume podcast and executive producer, me, Kat Davis. Hashtag LLAP. We'll see you next time.
Going through a Star Trek. We're doing Star Trek stuff in space. We probably got some phasers and shuttle pods, and we're gonna find a brand new race.
How's that for a slice of fried gold?